morning is a really short one-liner, but I really liked it. And so I printed it in your bulletin so that you would all have it to take it home. And we're all going to say it together, if you would, with me. It's by Maya Angelou. Let us live so we do not regret years of inertia and ignorance. So when we die, we can say all of our energy was dedicated to the noble liberation of the human mind and spirit, beginning with my own.
The scripture reading this morning is Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5. Don't judge, or you yourself will be judged. Your judgment on others will be the judgment you receive. The measure you use will be used to measure you. Why do you look at the splinter in your neighbor's eye and never see the board in your own eye? How can you say to your neighbor, let me remove the splinter in your eye, when the whole time there's a 2x4 in your own? Hypocrite! Remove the board from your own eye first. Then you'll be able to see clearly to remove the splinter from your neighbor's eye.
Would you pray with me? Divine presence, may we be open, mind, body, and spirit this morning, to new ideas, to new understandings of self, to letting go of and working on the inertia and ignorance in our own lives, that we might grow and change, bring this world to a better, more peaceful place. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your insight and your wisdom. Amen. So if you read my email this week or saw my Facebook post, you know that we are moving into a series on the spirituality of resistance, which might sound sort of odd to some of you. But think about Jesus for a minute. As far as I can tell, Jesus was a resistor. So my first question of the day is, what did Jesus resist? The hierarchy when it was corrupt. The money changers in the temple. Again, a corruption of a system. Perhaps a message to the hierarchy that they were missing the spirituality of things. What else?
Social norms?
Social norms. Sure, so some of the social norms, as in treating all people the same. So we could say he resisted inequity.
And judgment.
And judgment. He resisted judging. What else?
He resisted doing things the way they've always been done.
He resisted doing things the way they'd always been done, just for the sake of doing them, because they were always done. That didn't mean he didn't follow tradition, didn't mean he didn't follow the laws, but when they did not serve people and their wholeness, it was time to let go, right? What else did he resist? Resisted violence. Resisted prejudice.
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
Temptation.
What was that, John?
Temptation.
Temptation. Resisted temptation. So he was a resistor in a lot of ways. So I suggest that we think about, for the next 4 weeks, a spirituality of resistance. I think for him, it was his connection to the divine, an understanding that all things and all people are sacred, that led him to seek wholeness for himself and others, to stand up against systems and situations and attitudes and people that were inhibitors of wholeness. So that list that we just threw out there is still valid for each and every one of us, right? They're all the kinds of things that are still keeping people from wholeness in our day and time. And as spiritual people, it's part of, hopefully, ultimately who we are, the pull of the divine, of the connectedness of all of us, to want everyone to be free, to be whole, to be safe, to be healthy. And so we need to sometimes resist things that inhibit that. And that's why I was drawn to Maya Angelou's quote. She says, we need, and I'm going to go back to it because I want to get it right here, to live so that we don't regret years of inertia and ignorance. So inertia is what? Lack of movement, getting stuck, right? So we don't want to regret years of being stuck in our same mindset, in our same ways of being and acting and thinking, especially if they're unhealthy, right? And ignorance does not mean stupid. Ignorance means what, Mike? Because you're nodding. Disagreeing with me? The ignorance is what? A lack of education, a lack of understanding, a lack maybe even of trying to understand and learning and growing. So we don't want to get to the end of our lives and say, gosh, I was really stuck and I really didn't try and learn anything about anybody else. She says, hopefully we won't do that, so that when we die, we can say our energy was spent on the noble liberation of the human mind and heart and spirit, beginning with our own. That's so key to all of this, is that we begin with ourselves. And that's why I pulled this wonderful parable of Jesus, or this saying of Jesus, however you want to understand it, where he says, look, we can't just walk around judging other people. We need to look first at ourselves and take the board out of our own eye. Some versions say take the plank out of our own eye. He actually throws in this version throws in a 2x4. I don't know that they had 2x4s back then, but it works. So take the darn 2x4 out of your own eye, because frankly, if you've got a splinter in your own eye, are you going to the person with a 2x4 in their eye to take it out? No. We've got to work on our own stuff, our own judgments, our own issues, our own baggage, before we can be effective helping anybody else. So we start here. We start resisting our own personal biases. So I'd like to do a very short visualization with you. So if you would close your eyes and take a deep breath. And this comes from Valerie Alexander, and I'm just going to walk you through this. Just picture whatever comes to your mind's eye. Just take note of it as we go along. There are no rights or wrongs here, okay? So you are a business person going on a business trip, and you are in the airport. You have checked in your bags. You've gone through security, and you look at your watch, and you realize that you are late for your plane. And you take off, and you are running down the concourse. You get to your gate. You get into the gangplank. You're the last person on the plane. The doors close behind you. You're breathing heavy. Your heart's going. The pilot is doing one last little conversation with the flight attendant, and they turn and they greet you, and you rush down the aisle and you find your seat. It's been a rough start to your day, but you make it to your destination without any other issues. You check into your hotel. You're really hungry, and you decide to take yourself out for a really good meal. And you go to the local restaurant, and you have the best meal you've ever had. And the best dessert, and go ahead and enjoy that for a second, because there are no calories in this visualization. And you're by yourself, so you're watching the other folks in the restaurant, and next to your table there's this great couple who's celebrating their anniversary. So you go back to the hotel, you have a good night's sleep, you get up in the morning, and you head off to the biggest tech conference in the world. And you get all checked in, and you head into the auditorium, you find your seat, you sit down, and pretty soon the CEO of the hottest new tech startup in the US walks on stage to give the opening address. Now let me invite you to open your eyes. So me ask you a few questions. Was the pilot in your visualization black?
I didn't see the Bible.
You didn't see it? Well, I'm sorry you weren't following my visualization, Sue. Was the flight attendant male? Was the couple celebrating their anniversary two gay men? And was the CEO female?
Yes.
Good for you. And if you were, if you pictured them differently than any one of those that I just mentioned, it's okay, because the way our brain works is that what we image is what's most familiar to us. Right? And our brains are a little less fond of the things that are not so familiar to us. So we all have biases. A part of it is simply based on the way our brain works. If we image things that are familiar to us and things that we like, right? Our brain is happy with those things. But if we see something that is unfamiliar to us, or something that we have a preconceived notion about that is less likable to us, then our brain sort of elicits a fight or flight response that takes us down a path of creating perhaps situations that we're not happy with. So let's talk a little bit more about biases and about things that are familiar and things that are unfamiliar. So when Julie and I, early on in our relationship, she was a little hesitant about holding hands out in public because of how people might respond and because of what she's experienced in the past. And what I said to her was, if this is going to become normalized, people need to start seeing two women holding hands. If it's going to become familiar, if it's going to be something that's not going to elicit stares and maybe even an unwelcome, feeling inside people, sometimes it's just about getting used to it. It doesn't mean that they don't like LGBT folks. So just because you didn't picture the couple having an anniversary being gay, doesn't mean that you don't celebrate that, right? That may be perfectly fine to you. It's just that wasn't what your brain generated as a first response because it wasn't the most familiar to your brain. And your brain makes decisions in a millisecond of seeing something when it may take your thought process a little bit longer to come up with, oh, isn't that wonderful? And be accepting and excited for that couple. Do you know what I'm saying? There's that ingrained piece of us that if it's not familiar, it's like, oh my gosh! So, let's talk about personal biases, resisting our personal biases. Some of our personal biases are conscious. We know we have biases about certain things. I know I am biased about liking Cops custard over Gillies custard, right? Because I was brought up eating Cops custard, pretty much weaned on Cops custard, but my high school friends and I have this little fun rivalry about who has the best custard, because they are biased about Gillies custard, right? So we have some biases that are conscious. Leon's. See? And then we have those things that are called unconscious or implicit biases. Those things that we're not necessarily aware of. They're the judgments and the assumptions that we make really without often even thinking about it. And the most detrimental kinds of unconscious and implicit biases are those towards other people. Because then we can inadvertently act or in a way or say things that are hurtful. And none of us wants to do that. Brianne Dodson is a woman who's an educator. She's a principal. She also founded an education consulting firm to talk to schools and so forth about these kinds of things. And she says that, of course, oftentimes our unconscious and implicit biases are about non-dominant groups. Whether it's race or gender or sexuality or class or ability, we have unconscious biases often about them. And she said then it causes us to do things that we may not otherwise have done if we were conscious about what was going on. She talked about college professors who are more or who are less likely to open emails from students of a perceived race or ethnicity based on their name. Right? She talked about doctors who prescribe less pain medication to black people than white people with the same condition. She talked about preschool age little black boys who were disciplined and expelled. I didn't even know you could expel from preschool, frankly. Expelled much more often than their white counterparts. And it's not necessarily that folks, are consciously thinking, well, this is a little black boy, so I'm kicking him out. It's an implicit response based on things from our experience or our programming, frankly, from things that have happened to us or what we learned when we were growing up or have had other people say to us, whether it was our families or our teachers or our church or our pastors or our friends, our coaches. It only takes 3 exposures to create a bias. That's not a whole lot. So think for a moment about who you grew up with and who you didn't grow up with. Think about what church you went to or didn't go to. Think about what your parents said and who they interacted with, or what maybe their feelings were on different kinds of people, or what they weren't. What your friends said. It doesn't take much. Think about the television programming. Do any of you look back at the shows you watched as a kid and are appalled? Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch and I Dream of Jeannie and the Love Boat and Fantasy Island are all on my docket, right? Gilligan's Island, and I think about the female role models in those. And so much more. And what about television commercials? You know the television commercial that haunts me? This is the one that haunts me. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never, never, never let you forget your old man. Anybody remember the perfume? Angelique, right? That still goes through my head, so it was a really effective marketing campaign. But what was the message to women? That was the prejudice. You can do everything, and you should do everything, because it's all about you doing everything and taking care of the guy in your life. So no wonder I didn't know I was gay until I was 42, right? It didn't exist in my life. I did not mean to turn this into a comedy routine. Valerie Alexander tells a story. She's the one I stole the visualization from, which is maybe not stealing if I give her credit for it. So She is the CEO of a hot tech company now. But when she started off, she was a lawyer in a securities lawyer in Silicon Valley. And she said she was billing just ungodly amounts of hours the first year she was an associate. And she'd work until 2 a.m., which was not unusual. And one day she did this, she worked till 2 a.m., she took her timesheet, she put it on her assistant's desk, and went home, came in late the next morning. Her assistant had already been there, and she'd been there for 5 minutes, and her assistant walked in with her timesheet in her hand and said, "Would you like me to show you how to enter this into our billing system?" And Valerie looked at her, sort of stunned for a moment, and then politely declined. And she said it really bothered her, so she started asking around the firm. And of the 14 male lawyers, want to guess how many of them had ever been asked if they wanted to learn how to do administrative work and enter their own timesheets? Zero. And of the 6 female attorneys, you want to guess how many of them had done just the same? All of them. And in fact, she was the only one who had ever not entered her own timesheets, not learned how to do somebody else's job. And yet, she was pretty sure that if you asked any of those assistants, they would all say that they absolutely treated the male and female attorneys exactly the same. Yet clearly not. That's an implicit bias. It's something that causes us to act or say things that we maybe don't even know. We're saying that have some prejudgment to them and can be detrimental to other people. So it behooves us to think about what boards or 2x4s or planks we may have in our own eyes that we don't even know we have in our own eyes. So here's just a few thoughts for all of us, me included. Right? First, start to change your visualizations. If you're going to see a doctor for the first time, you don't know what they look like, maybe it's time to picture them all different ways. Maybe they're black, maybe they're Asian, maybe they have a prosthetic limb, maybe they're bald, maybe they have freckles. If we start to picture them in many different ways, then we don't have that initial, oh, they don't match my familiar image, right? Like our visualization. And so we won't have a negative internal stress response because we've already visualized so many different things that it should be more of a familiar thing to our brains. So the second thing is, we need to pay attention to how we respond to people, how we treat people, the things we say, the things we do. And ask ourselves sometimes, if the person that I just had that interaction with looked differently, would the interaction have changed? So, if that person had looked like me instead of looking different, would that interaction be different? If that person were a different color than me, would I have said something different? To start to analyze how we respond to other people. And to start to question our own assumptions. Like, why is it we think that a Harvard graduate is more intelligent than a graduate from one of our WC schools? Why is it that we ask certain things of men and certain things of women? Why is it that we are uncomfortable around trans people or gay people or drag queens? Why is it that we're not so sure that 2 women or 2 men can be adequate parents, but a male and a female can? Why is it, I could probably go on and on forever, right? All of these assumptions that we make. We have to start questioning. Why do I think that? Why do I think I have to bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and please my man all at the same time? Why do I think that? Because it ain't going to happen in my life now. So, question our assumptions is the second one. And the third thing is I've completely forgotten what the third thing is. Isn't that great? To make a conscious effort to broaden our minds, right? To step outside our cozy little comfort zone and to try new things. Go to a Jewish temple or a Hindu temple or a Sufi temple and experience their religion. Seek out situations like Juneteenth Day or a pride parade and interact with people who are different from you. Travel. Try new food. Do things that broaden your mind. Now, it's not going to erase those preconceived notions. It's not. Robin Smirchek was using this really great example. She says she uses in her training. So if you write the word hate on a piece of paper, and then you try to erase it or scribble it out, the impression of that word hate is still there, right? It's the same way with our implicit and unconscious biases. We can do everything we can to erase them and to scribble over them and to change them, but they're still imprinted in us somewhere. And we will always have to be careful that they don't find their way back out. But doing those three things helps us to manage them, helps us to hopefully behave in a way that creates wholeness. Okay, so quick visualization to end us. Okay, close your eyes, take a deep breath. You are now a college student sitting in a computer science class, and your professor walks in. You are surfing your Facebook page and seeing that a friend of yours posted a picture of a couple that they know that's just adopted a baby and are offering congratulations. And third, you're watching the TV news at night and you see the installation of Wisconsin's newest governor. Open your eyes. How many of you had those look very much different than your first set? And basically all that was a little bit of time thinking about different ways to visualize things so that our brains start to rewire and start to be familiar with all kinds of diversity. Starts to take the 2x4 out of our own eye. So, amen.